Hello and welcome. Where does Egypt stand on Gaza's humanitarian crisis? Is it the victim of the situation or adding to it? Well, as the territory's neighbour and largely sole source of supplies, every decision is a potential political crisis for the Egyptian government. And mounting criticism has brought the country's leadership role into the spotlight. Critics of President Hosni Mubarak say that the recently announced opening of the Rafah crossing into Gaza is a case of too little, too late. Passage is also restricted to only those needing medical assistance or individuals already possessing an Egyptian visa. Well, the Rafah route is unable to provide a ready flow of supplies like building materials, which are still in desperate need. Egypt's stance has made it increasingly unpopular in the Arab world, with some accusing it of collaboration with Israel, while its defenders say it is caught in a political catch-22, arguing that what Israel really wants is for Rafah to be Gaza's only link to the outside world, effectively choking Gaza's development while taking international pressure of its own blockade. On today's show, we ask, has Egypt become a political victim of the Gaza crisis, or should the country be doing more? Tell us what you think. Join our conversation with your questions and comments by SMS or an email, or just call into the show. Joining me now to discuss this is Dr. Maged Boutros, a professor at Cairo's Helwan University and a member of Egypt's ruling National Democratic Party. We also have Isandar Al-Amrani, an independent journalist and frequent commentator on political affairs. He recently wrote on Egypt's policy towards Gaza for Foreign Policy magazine. And Philip Risk, a filmmaker, journalist and blogger who lived in Gaza from 2005 to 2007. He's currently working on a book entitled The Gaza Strip, 3 Phases of Governance, a critique of the idea of state. Gentlemen, I welcome you all to the show. And Isandar, if I could start with you first and ask, with the situation with the flotilla, with what we've seen coming out of Gaza itself in terms of news of conditions there and the effort to rebuild and the difficulties in getting supplies, has this become a turning point for Gaza? Is there finally some movement on changing the situation for those living there?
Well, the short answer is that it's too easy to tell. I mean, the Israeli government has announced an easing of the blockade, but I mean, first we have to see whether they'll actually carry out what they say. We've seen in the last week more goods flow into Gaza, but will it continue? For how long? How easily will this flow of goods be upset? That's open to question. And there's the longer term question of the Gazans don't want the blockade just eased. They want it lifted altogether, and there's no clear sign as to when that's going to happen, what political process is in place for that to happen at all right now.
Okay. Dr. Maged Boutros, if I could bring you in here. So what is Egypt's official policy on Gaza? We know there are tunnels, we know there's the Rafah crossing, but what is the policy officially, and what does Egypt do in support of that policy?
Well, Egypt has a very well-known and declared policy towards Gaza for decades. Egypt is the only Arab country that sacrificed blood, money, sacrificed the well-being of the Egyptian citizen for decades. Now, Egypt is defending its own well-being, its own national security, and Egypt is a sovereign state. It has all the right to protect its borders. So now, this is a fact. Another fact is Hamas. Hamas is an arm of Iran. There are several parties are involved in here. It's not only the Palestinians. Egypt has been a supporter for the Palestinian rights for decades.
Okay.
Thirdly,
Dr. Boutros,
Egypt
Dr. Boutros, sorry, a quick thought, sir.
Opening its borders.
Mm-hmm. A quick thought, sir, here. I hear what you're saying about the policy and the way Egypt has had its decades-long policy, but let me ask you then how you react when now there's criticism saying that Egypt has betrayed or is now participating with Israel. It's basically become a collaborator with Israel against those living in Gaza.
Egypt is defending the strategic well-being of Gaza because Israel is trying to push Gaza to take the Egyptian side, and they want to put off the obligations, the legal obligations towards Israel. Israel is an occupying force, and they want to get rid of Gaza. Gaza is a pain in the neck of Israel. So they want to open the borders so that Egypt would take all the blame for this. If Egypt opens up the borders now, they say, well, take Gaza, and strategically this is not good for the Palestinian state. They want to fragment the Palestinian state. This is a long strategic plan for Israel. Now it's pursuing this long plan. Egypt is aware of this.
Okay, but Dr. Boutros, I'll get back to some of those issues you're raising there. It's very interesting. Let me bring in
the policy.
Okay, sir, I'll get back to you shortly in a moment. And Philip Risk, let me welcome you into the show and ask, I know some supplies are getting through now. We have the Rafah crossing is opened in a sort of restricted way. But since that crossing is opened, how important is it, how important are how easy is it to get some of these important supplies such as cement and those kind of construction supplies through to the people of Gaza? I think, Philip, we may have lost you. We'll get back to you in just a second. Then let me get back to Isander. Isander, same thing. There's some relaxation, but it doesn't look like the essentials are getting through to the people of Gaza, does it?
Well, right now the bulk of goods are coming through the borders controlled by Israel. The Egyptians, by and large, are not accepting any serious movement of goods, and especially the goods that the Gazans have lacked for the last year, construction material, glass, cement, and so on. None of this is going through Rafah. It's being routed by the Egyptians through across the Egyptian-Israeli border, and then it goes into Gaza, where it's subject to Israeli entry procedures. Rafah the Egyptian government has made Rafah a passenger terminal. People, I think about 16,000 over the last few weeks, Palestinians have come through the border, but very few goods, very few humanitarian goods or goods of any kind have gone through Gaza. That's really mostly on the under Israeli control.
Dr. Boutros, why would there be an objection by Egypt to letting through supplies such as cement? Why is Isander is saying, has it become essentially a passenger terminal at Rafah?
Well, there is a passage called El Karam. They flow the cement. They allow cement and other construction material. I don't know. The only product that's not allowed or prohibited from allowing them to across the borders is weapons and destructive material. I mean, I'm not aware of any reservation against cement or other construction material.
Okay. Isander, a question, if I could, to you from one of our viewers that wrote in from Nigeria. It was an email that we got in from Sadiq Muhammad Ali, who says, Egyptian politicians are using Gaza for foreign political gains because Egypt's economy depends on aid. Isander, do you see any economic factor for Egypt in all of this?
There's an economic factor, but it's really kind of bundled with a whole host of strategic factors. It's the geopolitics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, of the Arab-Israeli conflicts that are at stake here. Egypt is taking an anti-Hamas policy because it has its own differences with Hamas, but also, and perhaps especially because it's an ally of the United States. The United States and the Middle East Quartet, generally speaking, it wants to continue a policy of isolating Hamas, and Egypt is following that. Is that because of US aid? I think not only that, but that's certainly part of the question.
Dr. Boutros, a question we had from a viewer who wrote in through our Facebook page, Tunde Famu, wrote in with an email. If I could put this to you, sir. It says, Mubarak does not like Hamas, and that is why he worked with the West to make Hamas fail. He only opened the border to save his reputation. I wonder, I mean, obviously President Mubarak has come under a lot of criticism publicly in the Arab world, but how serious are the concerns in Egypt, and especially among the Egyptian government, that Hamas could strengthen its links with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt if there was more of an open border between Gaza and Egypt?
Well, when Hamas breached the borders and they destructed part of the wall between Egypt and Israel, they went into the Upper Egypt, several parts of Upper Egypt, and they had the Egyptian police confiscated several weapons and several destructive weapons and bombs manufactured in Gaza. I mean, what are those weapons and bombs being done, or what's the reason of penetrating them into the Egyptian borders? There are hidden agenda by Hamas. They have links with the Muslim Brotherhood, with fundamentalists in Egypt. They are called the Eastern branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. They have very close links with them. We expect that if we allow them to go through the borders, this will be jeopardizing the Egyptian national security and the well-being of the Egyptian citizens. That's one of the fears of the Egyptian government. What happened between Hamas and the legal, legitimate government in Palestine, we don't want it repeated in Egypt.
Okay, sir, I'll get back to you again.
Nobody
But
wants this.
Let me bring in Philip Risk. We've got him back now. Let me, Philip, you actually made an independent documentary on Gaza that was critical of the Egyptian government's position on Gaza, and then were later arrested while at a protest against the Egyptian government's policy. What sort of reaction did you have from the authorities to what you were saying?
I just have to correct you there, Riz. I wasn't arrested. I was actually kidnapped by the Egyptian authorities because I was participating in a non-violent protest that was directly protesting the ongoing siege on the Gaza Strip. I have to disagree with what Dr. Megid said earlier on about Egypt having to secure its borders. All that people are requesting, all that someone like myself is requesting, is that that border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt would be run like any other border, where people apply for visas and can cross officially like any other border, that goods would be crossing and trade would flow as any other border flows.
Okay, I'm going to get back to you all.
This excuse of security is simply not enough of a reason.
I'll get back to all three of you in just a second. We have to take a short break, but when we return, we'll take a look at the recent political protests in Egypt and what impact they may have on the country's leadership role. More of our discussion in a moment, so don't go away. Welcome back. How much has the humanitarian crisis in Gaza created a political rift in Egypt? Following the takeover of Gaza by Hamas in 2007, Egypt has kept its Rafah crossing point closed most of the time, adding to the humanitarian crisis unfolding there. And now, even with the crossing recently opened, many say it's a case of too little, too late, and that Egypt should be doing more. From Cairo, I'm joined by Dr. Magid Boutros, a professor at Cairo's Helwan University and member of Egypt's ruling National Democratic Party. Isander Al-Amrani is an independent journalist and frequent commentator on political affairs. And Philip Risk, a filmmaker, journalist and blogger who lived in Gaza from 2005 to 2007. We have a call from Florida here in the US. Imsha, what would you like to ask?
My question is, how much aid it is in quantum of aid that Israel gives to Egypt on a yearly basis?
Dr. Boutros, I guess this is a question to you. In terms of a relationship between Israel and Egypt, I guess our viewer feels that there's some kind of, at least some sort of financial relationship between the two countries.
I think the viewer said something about Israeli aid to Egypt. I mean, this is very inaccurate. According to the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, United States has agreed to provide Egypt and Israel annual aid. This aid is divided into military aid and economic aid. And the aid to Egypt is deteriorating and gradually phasing out. It started by 850 million in the late 1970s, and now it's about $200 million dollars a year of economic aid and 1.2 billion of military aid. So Israel does not provide Egypt aid. Israel has the largest amount of aid flowing from United States to any country worldwide.
Okay. Let me bring in.
Egypt has agreed
Doctor?
with the United States to phase out the aid.
Okay, Doctor, I'm going to bring in Philip Risk here and just ask, Philip, what was the reaction, what general sense have you had of reaction to Egypt's building a wall, the steel wall that's being built up to protect Egypt from Gaza, as Egypt says?
I mean, in certain circles, there is a complete outrage about this wall because it's really just a confirmation of the role that Egypt is playing in this conflict. They are simply giving in to pressure from the US, from Israel, to continue to build up this siege. But at the same time, I mean, Egypt is capable of controlling those tunnels at any point. With the security that's existent at the Rafah border, at any point they're able to close those tunnels, even without the border that's being built, without this border wall that's being built. So a large part of it, in my mind, is for economic interest. of a few individuals in the Egyptian regime.
Well, Isander, if I could bring you here and ask you to answer a question we got from Somalia by email, where Ali Nasser Abdurrahman wrote in saying, Egypt's dilemma stems from the fact that it is neither happy with Hamas nor capable of pressuring it. Egypt's long-term policy has sought to guide Hamas towards moderation and pragmatism. The Gaza war disrupted this. To what degree do you think that the situation in Gaza and the way it's being highlighted now internationally is forcing a reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas? Because it's a very difficult position for either side to remain separate when it comes to Palestinian, having a common Palestinian voice in support of the people in Gaza.
Absolutely, it's practically impossible to see a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through negotiations if the Palestinian polity is separate, if there is no united Palestinian government. Unfortunately, most of the parties involved in this don't seem to want reconciliation. Neither Hamas nor Fatah have tried very hard. Egypt, which is the country that's tasked with carrying out the negotiations for reconciliation, has basically entirely taken Fatah's sides and ignored Hamas demands for adjustments to the negotiations. The international community, in the shape of the Middle East Quartet, has also basically rejected the idea of dealing with Hamas. And I think most important of all, the United States, the Obama administration, has made it quite clear that it doesn't want to deal with a national unity government that would be composed of both, that would include Hamas members in it.
Dr. Magid Boutros, one of the things that's obviously, when this story has resonated around the world, particularly in the Arab world, people have been looking for leadership, and Turkey has willingly stepped in here. To what degree is Turkey's role and mediation basically taking away from Egypt's traditionally central role? Is Egypt losing its influence because of what's happening in Gaza?
Well, the international politics now moved from the bipolar system into a unipolar system. Now, regional powers like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey is trying to find a role to play in the Middle East. Egypt is playing a role, but it does not mean that Egypt has a leading role in the Middle East, that Turkey doesn't have one. Turkey has been so active with Iran, with Syria. Now it's now moving towards the Arabs. That's why Israel tried to give her an alarm by the Fertella incident. Israel was trying to tell Turkey, now we are aware that you are moving towards the Arabs, and this is not good for our strategic alliance. Now, for the last 5 years, Turkey and Israel has been involved in a strategic alliance. Now, Turkey has realized that its future is in the Middle East rather than towards Israel. So Turkey now is trying to play and crystallize this role by too much involvement in the internal politics. Turkey is not qualified enough to go into the details of the Palestinian issue.
Doctor?
Egypt is more concerned of this.
We've got a caller on the line. I'm going to try and squeeze him in as we're coming to that point where we've just a few minutes left. So Ashraf in Doha, please give us your question.
Yes, this question is for Mr. Boutros. I mean, we've been talking about the Turkish government trying to help Gaza. Everybody's trying to help Gaza, and here's the Egyptian government, status quo, years and years and years, and they don't want to do anything. And when there's a lot of pressure, political pressure from the people, we're going to open the border for a week, and then they shut it off again.
Okay.
Really, we're tired of this stuff.
Okay, Ashraf, thank you. Let me ask Dr. Boutros just a quick answer, sir. Do you see a change in Egypt's policy, perhaps a longer-term opening of the Rafah crossing rather than closing it down again? Do you feel that there will be a more open policy towards what's happening with Gaza coming up now as a result of this pressure?
Well, Egypt has been, as I said, sacrificing people, sacrificing its economy, sacrificing the national security because of the Palestinian issue. Now, nobody can allege that Egypt does not give enough. Egypt is so sensitive to the needs of the Gaza area. Gaza is not helping itself. Gaza or Hamas did sever its relationship with the legitimate administration chosen by the Palestinian people. Hamas is fragmenting the country, is destructing the Palestinian state. Okay. So don't blame Egypt for protecting its borders.
All right, sir. So I've got. Sir,
Egypt is so sensitive. When it felt that.
Sir, I'm just going to stop you. I'm sorry, because I have 1 minute. I need to get Philip Riz back in here with a quick question that came in from a viewer in Canada by Facebook. Rashid Hajir wrote in saying, the Egyptian regime has lost its leading role in the region since Camp David, and Mubarak is nothing but Israel's henchman. The humanitarian scandal in Gaza has just unmasked the bitter truth. Obviously, a lot of people angry about what's happening. A quick thought here, Philip. Do you think that there's a strong enough division within the Egyptian public to cause some serious concern to the president and his government?
I certainly think so, Riz. I think in combination with what's happening locally, some of the local politics in Egypt, with the outrage on the street against the regime in Egypt, there's a lot of risk for the continuation of this Egyptian regime.
Okay, I'm going to thank you very much there. Quick comment from Ms. Under. Do you see also a risk of unrest in Egypt as a result of this?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree completely with what Philip says, in that this, in combination with domestic concerns, with the fact that Egypt is within a few years we'll probably have a leadership change, since the president is quite elderly. That this is quite risky, and
I have to stop you there as well. I'm sorry, we're out of time, but I want to thank you all for joining us with this debate. Always never enough time and lots of questions. Thank you again. And thank you for being with us. Remember, you can catch previous shows on iTunes podcast. This week we're featuring our look inside the Taliban with a former high-ranking member of the group who was imprisoned at Guantanamo Bay, and an American journalist who was held captive by them. On the next show, the rise of robotic warfare. Battles are increasingly being fought by unmanned machines, keeping soldiers out of harm's way. Is this the future of war, and what are the ethical implications of these technological advances? Make sure you tune in for that. From me and the team, see you next time.